One. Hello and welcome to Yarn Live special edition for AFQY Women, and I have very special guest and friend Victoria Mahan here with me, and we're going to look at her journey with respect to where she started and where she is now. So if we think about that, we'll get excited about that because now CEO of a great company. But as always, let's go back to the AFQY beginning, and that is to ask you to introduce yourself so we can meet the person, not the suit. But we're obviously going to talk about business in a minute. So over to you, Victoria. Welcome aboard.
Hi, everybody. Well, we need to talk about myself for a minute. I'm a mum, and I'm also a stepmum to teenage girls. Born and bred in Auckland, grew up on the North Shore. Grew up with mum, dad, and older brother. Did a Bachelor of Commerce at Auckland University. From there, went off to be an assistant accountant, and my journey has sort of flowed through some finance-related work both in New Zealand and overseas. I'm a member of Global Women. I'm also a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants and the Institute of Directors, and a board chair. This is my fourth board position, and it is for a local school. So I get to give back and hopefully make a difference.
Awesome. Well, that'll keep you busy. I was sort of thinking the kids and the stepkids, that would keep you busy. And this is part of the question, actually. We didn't put it in the questions. We always work to a reasonably set of questions. But the, what is it? The invisible workload. We'll add that one on, I think, because I'm always amazed. Like when I look at my own mother and what she did a big job, just like my dad, but she also did the house, the kids, coaching the sports teams, you name it as well. So yeah, but coming back to you, like we've just heard about the kids and the stepkids, what sort of age bracket are they? Littlies, teenies?
No, 7 and 14. So we're in the interesting years, teenage girls. Navigating high school, so interesting times for us.
Crossing into adulthood, and yeah, they probably, what's the old joke, 14 going on 24 or something like that. Adults really got a lot to learn. And you are a chartered accountant.
Yeah.
So is that something that you have to do like an annual refresh on your license, or you did it back in the days of being an accountant and it's there forever?
So you have to do continuing professional development hours each year, and you've got to make sure that you're continuing to learn and upskill, etc. So just like you do with the Institute of Directors, there's a number of different requirements, but you do the main part of the requirements early on. So you have to have a university degree, and it has to have certain components, and then you go off and whilst you're working, you do some exams and workshops and assessments, etc. So I think all in all, it takes 7 years.
Oh wow! Okay.
For a degree to completion or admission to be accepted as a chartered accountant. Yeah.
Yep. And I think it's only 6 years to become a doctor, and I better caveat that, but the reason I know that is that it takes 8 years to become an architect, 5-year degree, and then 3 years same until you've passed that. I guess it's something like the lawyer's bar exam. You've got to pass something before you can actually officially call yourself legally an architect.
Yeah.
So auto accounting. But what we're getting a picture of is, I guess, at a high level, just how much you're doing and keeps you busy. Now, the 4 boards, so your involvement with those, I think one you mentioned was a school. Let me ask what the other ones are.
No, I'm now currently on one board, which is a school, a local school. Prior to that, I've also been on a charity, another school, and also I was on a corporate board. So different experiences, required different skill sets, but I've really enjoyed it. Quite like the governance aspect and the ability to actually bring the skill set that you've got and help. You find that particularly in a school setting, there's lots you can do by helping a school move forward, whether that's generating income or navigating, what the strategic plans are, etc. So it's really good. I've been doing that for a number of years now.
Cool. So now we've got an appreciation of your world sort of in and outside of work. Can you take us back to the beginning? Because I think your journey in particular is one of the more interesting ones, and because it's so different. Going from accounting, and let's not use stereotypes here, but accounting and sales are probably the opposite ends of the spectrum in some regards, quite different. So can you tell us about that journey and some of the moments over time, and some of the interesting stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, so look, I at high school, at Rangitoto College, I was quite good with numbers and economics and really enjoyed those two subjects. So it was quite natural for me to think about heading to university and focusing on accounting specifically. My older brother went down that path, so he sort of paved the way. And so having done my BCom at Auckland Uni in accounting and commercial law, it was time to enter the workforce, and I ended up working for Andy Dalton as an assistant accountant at a company, Medical Waste Group, where I worked for sort of 16, 18 months before I made the bold decision to move to London and thought, let's give this a crack, go over there, work, travelled with some friends. So I spent 6 months there and loved it, but it was a really tough market. So I came home and I joined Ernst & Young. And so I spent a really good 3 years there, actually upskilling and qualifying, and I was an auditor as well as a consultant. So I got to know lots of New Zealand businesses during that time. Yep. And then I decided, hey, look, I think I might head back to London. And this time I was sponsored by another firm. And so I went over there and spent the best part of 2.5 years over in the UK working across in different roles, private equity and raising funds, as well as mergers and acquisitions. And then I did some sort of management financial accounting before I travelled and came home. So that was really the journey to that point. And then when I came home, I knew I wanted to work for a household brand name. I just didn't know which company specifically that was. And at the time, I was given an opportunity to join HP. So I joined there and worked as a finance manager for a number of years. And there was a lot of changes during that time. And what that meant is I picked up more responsibility and eventually became the CFO, as well as looking after 2 of the business units. And I was fortunate enough to work for somebody that supported and believed in me, and I made a change and moved into product marketing. And so I had a team, I think it was about 9 people at the time, and it was a newly created position. It was opportunity to try something new. So I jumped into that with 2 feet, and obviously took all the experience and skill set that I had from a financial perspective into that role. And I worked in that for about 5.5 years, again picked up more portfolios. And then again, another opportunity arose, and I was asked to move into a sales role. Again, it was a newly created position, so I jumped into that. And I think it was more about leadership skills, and there was obviously process and rigor and focus on metrics, but it was also around leading a team and bringing the teams together. So that I was fortunate that I had some amazing people that really believed in me and supported me through that journey. But it was, here's an opportunity, would you like to take it? And of course I did.
So you mentioned opportunity about 3 or 4 times through that, and I think at the first one you mentioned someone, the comment was someone believed in you. I think that was when you first made the move, probably from finance over to product marketing or product management. Yeah. So can you tell us about that? Because that will be a particular interest to a lot of the people that are trying to emulate your stream up towards CEO. And I think there's been a lot of talk about having someone that believed in you. And when we heard from Jolie and Justine, there was that very story that got Jolie across from Lion to Spark in the first place, and then up the chain to the opportunity of CEO. So sounds somewhat similar. So can you share a little bit more about that and some of the bits that might give people insights for their potential future?
Yeah, sure. So I was really fortunate that I worked for a couple of people actually, and they were amazing. They were really supportive. I was allowed to vocalise that I didn't want to be a finance manager. I didn't want to be doing month end forever. I wanted to move into a different role, and they were really open to hearing that. And so that's something that I perhaps learned early on, is it's actually okay to say, hey, look, I'm going to work really hard in this particular position now, but longer term I really want to have an interest in a different area. So we had really open conversations, and they were supportive of enabling me or helping me to move into a different position. And as I said, I think largely it was centered around skill set. It was, you have a particular skill set which I think is transferable, and we could use that skill set in this particular area. So it was about trying to broaden their skill set. It wasn't just about being really good at numbers or really good at financial or management accounting. It was, can you understand things from the customer's perspective? Can you take a strategic view? So there was lots of other skill sets that I perhaps acquired that were attractive to enable me to move into a different role.
Very cool. And you talked about they were open to hearing, I'm going to work hard in this role, but I do want to move into another area. And that's interesting, because I remember, I don't know, maybe it was my upbringing, but I always had a little bit of fear of saying anything like that, because I think I had it drummed into me to be grateful for any job you got. And everyone has different life experiences, right? So it comes from your parents. In my case, my dad used to go down and renegotiate to get the workers back in from a strike. And there's all sorts of things that went on in my parents' era that probably haven't been in my era, and certainly if not in the next generation. So it's interesting how the intergenerational things get passed on through your experiences. But so did you have a pretty good relationship with them? And obviously you've been doing well, and they were really happy with you. You had that sort of relationship where you could probably talk freely, to give people an idea. So it's not like you're working on day one and you rock up and go, hey.
No, and look, that's the balance. I've spent 7 years in a finance role, and so for me, I'd worked really hard, and I think I had, I'd proven myself. I'd sort of gone the extra mile. I'd got stuck into things, and I'd become, a key support person for them. So I think I'd done the time, and as I said, I'd worked really hard. It wasn't that I was in the role within 6 months and said, hey, look, actually I want to move, and I want you to enable me to do X, Y, and Z. It was actually, I've worked really hard, and as part of being a great leader, you have to understand your people. You have to understand where they want to go and what they want to do. So that was very much the discussion that I worked with the people that I reported to for most of the time was, what's the professional development? How can I take constructive feedback on board, and how can I improve and update my skills and move forward? So it was very much an open dialogue.
Cool. So just thinking about that, and what was I thinking of? Escaped my mind for a second. Oh, the shift from command and control management to this. Now we talk about servant leadership, and it sounds like you had a servant leader back in the days before it was all over LinkedIn. So that's really good, and perhaps that's one of the things that people should look for, is the right type of leader. I think they talk about I guess the negative statement is join a company, leave a manager, but the positive version of that would be is to find a good leader, and over anything else when you look at those moves. So if we were coming back a little bit and thinking, you talked about having kids and in the teens and pretty
Yeah.
busy with that. We often get asked by women in relation to these sessions of how do you juggle being a mum, and a lot of questions there from first-time mums or those that are expectant mums. And of course, there's lots of talk about how women's careers change after they have children, usually because of having children, how they might be perceived by the business or for the business or probably by that person. And the last wee thing is probably a little bit of intergenerational old school thinking versus new thinking. But for those women out there that are about to become mums or are mums, what are some of the things you've learned about juggling the two roles?
Well, it's hard. And you can't be super mum and you can't be amazing at everything. So you really have to focus on what's important, where your priority needs to be. I mean, you just talked a minute ago about finding the right leader. And that's, for me, when you're a parent, any parent, mother or father, you've got to make sure you're working in the right environment that's going to help support you be a parent. And so looking for the right organisation or the right manager or, the right team is really important. Understanding that you can't be perfect at everything, as I said, and focusing on what's important. Like I always think about, what is my daughter and my stepdaughter, what are they going to think of and remember? What are the moments they're going to remember? They're going to remember a really stressed out mum that's working all hours of the day, or they're going to remember a mum that's really invested and was there at the important times and was shouting from the sidelines at their sport, or working with them when they had a challenge. So I think you've got to understand and think about what are the key things you want to focus on and prioritise, because you can't do everything. And then you've got to find the right environment that's going to allow you or enable you to do that. And
yeah,
I think COVID probably accelerated it with the working from home, flexibility. I know I've seen a lot of people change their view around, working from home and being able to be flexible in their work in the last year. And so you've got to work out what works for your family, because it's not a one size fits all. And you've just got to do the best that you can.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to put the acid on you a bit more on this one, because yes, that sounds absolutely brilliant. But when you have, I think the traditional thing is, I'm going back to my childhood to remember some of these things. We had a family friend, two boys the same age as my older brother, and she got in strife because she took so much time off being a solo mum for her two boys being unwell. And this is a classic thing, how much time you're going to take off as a mother. This is all the old sort of. So you talked about being able to focus on what's important. And I think the thing that gets people worked up is, I want to be there for my kid and I want to do that. But if I don't get that piece of work done on time, on that deadline, I'm now going to not be seen as a great achiever. I'm not going to get the opportunities. It might actually be detrimental to my employment. I might end up on performance management. So the one thing I've got in the middle there is finding the right environment. But is there something you raised with your company, or you said to your team, or if we can get some more insights into that area for the mums out there that are wondering how to deal with their situation?
My journey was.
You're now the boss. What would you say to someone who is, what would you say to yourself when you were just first having your first child and all the work situation? What advice would you give that person?
Make sure you've got a great support network. Really, and if I think about my journey, I found myself being a single mum with a very young child, and yes, and so I went back to work, and I had to find the right balance between looking after a little person and working a full-time job. I had an incredibly supportive boss and an amazing team, but I also had a support network behind me in terms of my family and my friends, and I had to lean on them when I needed to. So I worked really hard, but I also worked really hard at being a present mum and being there for my daughter. And I took the opportunities when I could of working extra hours and shuffling my work day. I was fortunate to work for a company that had flexible hours, from very early days, and so it wasn't hard to shuffle my work day around a little bit, work a little bit at night to catch up if I had to leave early to pick up my daughter, etc. So, but I had an amazing support network behind me, and family and friends, and you just have to get through it, really.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the big thing, is that the environment and the person you work for. There's going to be that odd occasion with the bell-shaped curve of anything that there's going to be a bad egg, and most people are pretty good. So yeah, it's a good story, an example. So I think we've probably got a good insight onto that one. So now we'll move on to the next question. On your trajectory, did you face any challenging moments, let's call it what it is, sexism, and how did you deal with it?
Like many people, I've faced a lot of challenges. I mentioned before I was a single mum with a young child. That was a challenge. But yes, I've had instances which haven't been appropriate in terms of what's occurred or has been handled in the right way. I'm a firm believer that, when you get knocked down, you sort of pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you sort of move forward. And I've been really fortunate in my career to be surrounded by a really great group of people that have been really supportive. So when I've needed to lean in on people, my support network, whether that's my colleagues or family and friends, I've done that. It's not acceptable in any form to see any sexism and or bullying or discrimination in the workplace. And I think, you have to lean on your support network. You need to sometimes have bold conversations, and you need to raise it appropriately and make sure that you're continuing to talk to the right people. One of the things that's really stuck with me over the last couple of years is an event that I hosted some time ago where Craig Hudson, he used the phrase, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And for me, that really resonates because, you only accept what you're willing to, the behaviour that you're willing to put up with. And if you're not willing to accept it, well, then it's on you to really raise that and have a bold conversation.
Absolutely. And yes, young Mr. Hudson, just one most inspiring Kiwi. And I think we all know why, with his work, both putting the programs in place at Xero, but also sharing his own story. Now, that little quote I'm just typing in, you might hear me clickety clack, as I mentioned before. That was
the standard you walk past is the standard you accept.
The standard you walk past is the standard.
And I know that he didn't necessarily come up with that. I think it originated from someone in Australia many years ago, but it was a real example of challenging people to say, hey, look, if you walk past something and you don't do anything about it, then you accept it. So, that's really resonated with me in terms of but having bold conversations and saying, hey, actually, that's not good enough.
So, interesting little story on that note. At the High Tech Awards, and here I am videoing an award to post, which, anything can happen. and the table beside me, they were also videoing something, and someone walked through, and I won't repeat what they said, but it was the word I won't repeat is F, but they said, "Get out of the way, you fat F."
Oh
Right.
no.
So I had to edit it out of my video, but at the end, when it all quieted down, I turned around and just said, "Hey mate, watch your comment." About 10 people spun around, and he went, "Oh, sorry." But
Yeah,
I turned around quietly. I turned around quietly and said to the person beside me, "Did you hear what he said?" They went, "No, but I heard what you said." And I think he said something pretty bad. I said, "Yeah, I'd say that would be a fair enough thing." But ironically, the person carried on throughout the whole night. And I was thinking, do I say something more? Or is this the inappropriate space? I personally would say more, but I was thinking more of everyone else who might feel by it. But I was, it wasn't anything as bad as that again, but it was just that sort of ongoing attitude of say what I want. But yeah, I think they got the surprise of their life when I said, "Oi, watch your comments."
Yeah. Well, good on
And
you. Because
this
you should
bright-faced
call it
young
out.
person looked at me and thought, "Ooh." Yeah. So that's really good advice. And I think at the beginning you said, you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself
Yeah.
off. And coming back to that comment, that quote Craig shared around the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And that dusting yourself off is really important. And actually hearing yourself say that's not acceptable, whether you actually say it to the person or having a bit of a catch up with your support network, but you have to yourself identify, no, that wasn't acceptable. Yes, it happened. It wasn't acceptable. And if there's further actions to take, then yes, recommend you take them. But you've at least got to say to yourself verbally, that was not acceptable, and I won't be spoken or treated that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Now, on that note, just to leave us a little bit extra, I think you probably covered it actually in terms of the advice for a young woman coming to the industry.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, let's move on to that last one, which is the big one. What do you consider your biggest lesson? So let's think about, let's treat this as sort of closing remarks. I always say closing remarks and I ask a question because it's always so interesting. But what do you consider the biggest lesson that you would pass on to someone else?
I think I've had many. And I was thinking about this when you mentioned it, that we would talk about it today. And I've touched on a little bit. I think the first one is about being bold sometimes and having a bold conversation or making a change. Change is good. Change can be really positive. It can be scary at times, but I think sometimes we've got to make bold moves for whatever reason. I think also one of the other lessons, it's really about, life's about connecting with people. And, I really enjoy meeting new people and hearing stories and hearing about their journey. And I think it's about authentic connections. And I think back to a lesson really for me was when my father passed away. And some years ago, 16 years ago, he passed away. And at his funeral, I really learnt a lot more about him. What I learnt was just how many people he had connected with, just how many people that he had had an influence on, and how he'd made a difference in community and to people's lives. So that was a really big lesson for me in terms of what's important. And it probably started my journey of giving back to the community and spending time helping others, because I realised at that point what was really important. And as I said, I got to know lots of things about my father, either through letters that were sent to us or cards or people that were around and present or wanted to pay their respects. I was like, wow, I actually didn't know the impact that my dad had had on so many people's lives. So it really started me, I started thinking, well, actually, what is it I'd quite like to be known for? How can I help? What can I do with my skill set? And what makes you feel good inside? And that was really about connecting with people, and so that was a lesson for me. And as I said, being bold and accepting, learning where your standards are. What is it that you will accept? What is it, from a moral point of view? Being in an environment which allows you to be you, allows you to be to bring yourself and what you're interested in and how you feel. It's really important, because if you're not in that environment, it can be really, really tough.
Yeah. No, there's some brilliant lessons, and yes, it's an observation actually my father-in-law made. That's always his comment was around going to a funeral, and similarly the effect of what he heard, and it's always made me reflect on what will people say at my funeral. Will anyone even turn up? So it is, what is that legacy you leave behind? And to connect and to give back is a pretty positive and honourable sort of approach. Certainly can't go wrong with giving back and helping others. And I think you've definitely been doing that. Sort of goes without saying, really. But now also in a role such as CEO, you're in the position where you have the ability to provide that influence and guidance. I guess mentorship, coaching, all those different variations. So it's very nice achievement to work to where you are now, get to where that is, and face the challenges. And the last one I'll comment on, which I save for last, is being bold. I like that. So there's a very simple statement I use every now and then, which is, if you don't ask, you don't get an answer. So we'll be having a yarn live with Dave Clark, the Honourable Dave Clark, around what's happening with the digital strategy that's just quietly come out through Tech Week, and probably wouldn't have happened if I'd just gone through the normal email channel. I was bold, and I pinned him down at the High Tech Awards, and we're getting it popular. So yeah, I'm putting your advice.
Sometimes you got to lean out. Sometimes you got to lean out and say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if I approach that person and ask them if they can help, or they can do an interview in your case, or if I ask my manager for something that's different, or I put my hand up and say, hey, look, I need some help here. Life's a bit tough at the moment, and I need some support. I need some help. And people can say yes, or they can say no, as long as they say yes and no in the right frame and in the right way. But you've got to be bold enough sometimes to ask for what you want.
Absolutely. Well, that is a beautiful place to end this yarn live. And just to recap for everybody, this is AFQY Women. You'll see the logo at the bottom there with the symbol in there. And this is a continuation on since March 8th, where we did the International Women's Day event and had such a resounding effect of the discussions afterwards around women taking on advice from other women and learning from other stories and taking those bold steps. So thank you very much for being with us, Victoria, and sharing your story. I really love the move from accounting over to sales and being so effective. You're now the CEO of a great organisation, and a wonderful example to share. Also, having gone through that, being a solo mum a period of time, probably at the most challenging at the beginning, by the sounds of it, if I got everything right. So pick yourself up, dust yourself off, be bold, lean out, and see if you can pursue exactly what you want in life, just as I expect you have yourself. So we'll say ka kite anō.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Cheers.
Bye.